Hello everyone. Hello my lovely students again. So today we're going to continue our science lesson talking about the plant life cycle. And as I showed you yesterday, this picture that summarizes the general life cycle of a flowering plant, and this also the life cycle of the tomato fruit or tomato vegetable. So I want you always to remember these two pictures. Okay, so I want you to go and grab your book, your science book, also a highlighter, a pencil, an eraser, maybe a sharpener, and your notebook so you can take any notes. I want you to go to page 135. 135. And in this, and at the top of the page, as always, I want you to write today's date, which is 31st March 2020. Very good, everyone. So, where we have a text here, it's an expository text that gives us information and tells us what do we mean by plant life cycle and why do plants have a life cycle. So we're gonna read it very quickly. We're gonna talk and discuss some main and very important ideas, and then we're gonna move on to the next page. So I'm gonna read. If you wish, you can also read with me and highlight the things that I will highlight as well. Okay? So plant life cycles. Living things change during their lives. Most living things begin their lives small and then grow large. So plants or plants in general are one of the many things that are considered living things on this earth. So for example, animals, humans, insects, for example also bacteria, things that we cannot see. All these things are living things because they are alive, okay? And they have a cycle. So everything that is alive, everything that has a life has a life cycle. What do we mean by a life cycle? They may develop certain features as they change into adults. So they grow from being small. So here, most living things begin their lives as small, then grow large. Like you, for example, you were a baby, then you became a toddler, then like a little by little you are now a big boy and a big girl, and then you're gonna turn into a young man and a young lady, and so on and so forth until you will be an adult, inshallah. So they may develop certain features as they change into adults. So everything will change into adults from being a baby to a young thing to an adult. They reproduce to make more living things the same kind, and as every living thing, again, they reproduce. So they produce again the same thing. For example, human reproduce human, plants will reproduce plants, animals reproduce animals, insects reproduce insects, and so on and so forth. So they reproduce the same kind, the same living thing. Eventually means finally, living thing dies, and finally that thing will die. So from a baby thing to a young thing to an adult, and then finally that thing will die, whether it's a human, whether it's a plant, an animal, or an insect, or a bacteria, or whatever it is that is a living thing. Will start as a baby, then as a young thing, then as an adult, and then the last thing will die. The stages, what do you mean by stages? Yes, the phases or the the stages through which a living thing passes during its life are called a life cycle. So the different stages, the different like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, the different floors for example, so the different phases through which a living thing passes. So as I said, being a baby is one thing, like one stage, and then you go up to another stage or another level. Okay, so the stages are levels, and then you go up to another level, which is being young, or a young boy or a young girl, and then or a young plant, and then going from the young thing to another stage, to another level, okay, being an adult, and then moving from adult stage or adult level to being very very old, and then eventually die. Okay, so these stages or these levels that any living thing passes through or passes during its life, we call it the life cycle. Okay, it's called the life cycle. So any life cycle of any living thing has stages. Okay, they can vary. Some stages are like we have a lot of stages. Some living things have like really short cycles. So some cycles are long, some cycles are short. Some life cycles have many stages, and some life cycles have few stages, so they are short cycles. Most plants go through similar stages during their life cycle. So, as I said, as a living thing, a plant go through a life cycle. It also has a life cycle, but plant life cycles can differ in important ways. Okay, so as I said, living things have different life cycles. They are not the same like in every cycle. So life cycles from one living thing to another, they change. For example, plants produce different ways. So plants reproduce different ways. Most plants make seeds that can grow into new plants. So as we already seen, some plants that they make seeds, and these seeds reproduce into new plants. But some plants do not have seeds, okay, and some plants do not have seeds. They reproduce by making spores. Okay, do you remember the difference between spores and seeds? Yes. Okay, so spores, we find them. Yes, very good. Okay, like mosses and ferns. You remember these types of plants? Yes, mosses and ferns, they produce spores instead of seeds. So these spores reproduce the new plants or the new moss or the new fern. Plants reproduce in different ways, have different cycles. This is very important, and maybe I will do it in another color. I will highlight it in another color, but maybe it will not. So the flowering plants that have seeds, their life cycle is different. Let me just change the color. Okay, I'll do it in 2. Okay, and the other ones. Okay. So plants that reproduce in different ways have different life cycle. So the plants that reproduce using seeds, they have a specific cycle. Plants that reproduce using spores have a different cycle. Plants that reproduce using cones have a different life cycle, and so on and so forth. Very good. Okay, so as if you can see the picture, this is what type of tree is this? Is it a flowering plant or conifer plant? Yes, very good. Okay, because it has a cone or a corn. This is a type of a seed that is inside a cone, and this is an oak tree. Okay, this oak tree, we will read, it's beautiful, so we will read the fact about it. So every acorn contains a seed. Every acorn contains a seed. The seed can grow into a new oak tree. So the seed is inside, is inside this acorn, and when it falls and it has the right conditions and it has very good conditions to grow, it grows into a new oak tree. So it's reproduced into the same kind of plant, which is an oak tree. Most oak trees grow for at least 20 years. They grow for at least 20 years before making seeds. So do you see this tree here? After 20 years of its age, it starts producing the seeds. So it doesn't produce seeds right away when it is grown. No, after 20 years, when it is fully grown up. Okay, so it's like after 20 years. So the life cycle of this plant, of the oak tree, is very long life cycle, and it's not as short as for example the plant that you have seen, like tomato plant, for example. Okay, very good. Maybe you can this is a really good fact, so maybe we can circle it like this. Okay, and then we move to, why is it moving? I wanna move. Okay, and then we move on to the next page. Okay, so I want you to move to the next page. Yes, this page. Okay, 136. Life cycle of a flowering plant. The life cycle of a flowering plant. So a pumpkin plant is a kind of flowering plant. So the pumpkin plant, you know what is a pumpkin, okay? And the pumpkin plant is a flowering plant. The life cycle of a pumpkin has several stages. So as I said, every life cycle is different, and every life cycle has numbers of stages. So for example, Some plants have a life cycle that contains 3 stages, 4 stages, 5 stages, and so on. So here we look at the life cycle of the pumpkin plant. And as we can see, we have 4 stages. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this is a circle because it's a cycle, okay? It's a cycle that goes on and on and on. So let's read the first stage, which is germinating the seed. Germinating seed. A pumpkin seed germinates when water, oxygen, and the warm temperatures are present. A stem grows up and roots grow down. So when we plant a seed, so we take a pumpkin seed and we plant it in a good soil, and this soil, and we give it water, we give it oxygen, and it is in a good temperature, so it's not freezing cold, and it's really really hot, so warm temperature. So then it starts growing, and you see the roots here. The roots start growing underneath in the soil, and the stem starts growing up and going out from the soil. The second stage is growth. So the young plant grows leaves. So then here this stem starts to grow leaves and start to make sugar for food, and these leaves start doing its job. And we've already seen that what is the job of the leaves? Very good, okay? Leaves make food. And what type of food? We said it's a sugar kind of food. So it grows into an adult plant with flowers, and this young plant will grow into a plant that has flower. So this is the flower. Then we have pollination. So these flowers now, what do they need? What these flowers need now? They need pollination. Very good. Some pumpkin flowers make pollen. So as you've already seen, we have 2 types of flowers, like we seen in the conifer. We also have 2 types of cones. One that makes pollen and one that takes the pollen and makes a seed. So some flowers make the pollen, and other flowers use the pollen to make the seeds. So some flowers have the pollen, and some flowers take the pollen and make the seeds. Pollination happens when pollen moves from one pumpkin flower to another. And the last stage, which is the adult plant with seeds. So now when the flower that makes seeds takes the pollen starts it's growing around the seeds inside the flower, and then the fruit starts to grow, and this fruit starts to grow around the seed, to protect it. And then we have this fruit. The pumpkin is a fruit made by the pumpkin plant. It contains seeds formed after pollination. The seeds can become new plants, and then also this pumpkin has a lot of seeds inside. So these seeds again will, if they have the right conditions, if people do not eat them, they will grow into a new pumpkin plant. Very good. Okay, now we go to number 2. Question number 2. In stage 3, this stage, in stage 3, what likely moves pollen from one flower to another? What likely moves pollen from one flower to another? So, how does pollen moves, or how does pollen move from one flower to another? So the pollination process happens. You can pause the video and answer the question, and then play the video again and correct it. So I will correct on count 3. So 3, 2, 1. As we've already seen, there are like maybe many factors that cause pollinations to move, or pollen to move from one flower to another, or from one cone to another, and one of them is wind. Very good. Okay, wind. So wind helps the pollen to move from one flower to another. So when it is windy, or when there is a breeze, the wind carries the pollen from one flower to another. Also insects. Okay, so an example of insects is bee. Okay, so when a bee goes to a flower, the pollen sticks to the legs of the bee, and when the bee moves to another flower, it also carries that pollen to another flower. Animals also, and so on and so forth. Very good. So this is it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you in the next one, and we will continue talking about plant life cycle. See you there. Bye.